Bryce Young not throwing at the combine. Got the internet going nuts. A lot of quarterback chatter around here in Houston heading into the NFL combine. When the quarterbacks will speak on Friday, they will work out, some of them, on Saturday. It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can listen to me 10 to 2 Central, Monday through Friday on In the Loop on Sports Radio 610, official home of the Houston Texans. Subscribe, like, all that, right along. It's getting really fun, and this is a fun time of the year. 2 weeks away, by the way, from free agency. So there's been kind of a downtime, but it's about to pick up, and it hasn't stopped around here. Bryce Young not throwing at the combine. For me, I look at this as a good thing. I'm a Bryce Young guy. I've made that very clear. You've probably heard that 16,000 times on this channel. I'm a Bryce Young guy. I think that he is the only quarterback that I am 100% sold on as being good in this draft. And if he doesn't throw, whatever. What does he really have to gain? Like, everybody knows that Bryce Young, when it comes to throwing the football, when it comes to spinning it, he's the best of all these guys. He might not have the strongest arm. He might not be able to throw it however long that, or however far that Will Levis can, but Bryce Young is the best. And just like Trevor Lawrence, just like Joey Burrow, just like Kyler Murray, who were the number one quarterbacks in their drafts, Bryce Young probably looked at this and said, there's really nothing for me to gain. And there's a reason why it was so important for Will Levis, Anthony Richardson to throw at the combine. Nothing really to gain for Bryce Young. Like, what was the best case scenario that would have happened for Bryce Young? Like, is he going to go out there and throw the ball at a high level, and all of a sudden people are going to say, oh, well, he's 5'10", but the people who are already down on Bryce Young for being 5'10", those people are going to become louder. They're not going to become any less loud if they watch Bryce Young run some drills. He's going to save it for his pro day. I have no issue with it. I'm actually glad that he is doing that. I also find this kind of amusing, and I think I think I saw the light today during the show In the Loop on Sports Radio 610 when it comes to just how I feel about these quarterbacks. And again, this is my reality. And a lot of times my reality is not proportional with the reality of the world, but this is how I feel that the Bryce Young thing is going right now. I feel like there's a lot of people who don't believe Bryce Young is going to be a franchise quarterback. And I'm talking from a Texans point of view. And I can't blame you. The chances are that a quarterback that's drafted in the first round, he's not going to end up being a franchise quarterback. Those are just the odds. It's a very hard position to evaluate. There's a lot of variables, and more times than not, a quarterback drafted in the top 5, and there have been 14 drafted in the top 5 of the last 10 years. Blake Bortles, not a franchise guy. Jameis Winston, not a franchise guy. Marcus Mariota, not a franchise guy. Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, not franchise guys. Mitchell Trubisky, not a franchise guy. Baker Mayfield, not a franchise guy. Sam Darnold, not a franchise guy. Kyler Murray, to be determined. Burrow, franchise guy. Tua, to be determined. Trevor Lawrence, we think franchise guy. Zach Wilson, not a franchise guy. Trey Lance, not a franchise guy. So I think we just named 3 guys that are franchise guys. So the chances are the quarterback's going to bust out and you'll look smart. I wouldn't bet on it with Bryce Young, but if you do bet on it, more times than not, you're going to cash that ticket, and the quarterback's not going to be the end-all, be-all, and the savior that we hype him up to be. It's a hard position. Sometimes it's just not available. So if you're not down with Bryce Young, I can understand that. Here's where I'm having trouble in this draft. If you don't like Bryce Young, don't try to convince yourself that any of these other guys are franchise guys. Like, don't try to convince me that Will Levis is going to be a franchise guy, or Anthony Richardson's going to reach some sort of potential that everyone keeps talking about, or CJ Stroud. Maybe they do, but I just don't see how you're putting any of them in the same category as Bryce Young. He was the highest recruited guy going into college. Some probably thought he was too small then. He was the best quarterback in college when he was there. And he's right now the popular pick to be the top quarterback. Now, if you don't think that he's a franchise guy. That's fine. Don't try to sell me on these other guys. I just can't be sold on them. You really want to give Will Levis the keys to your franchise with the number 2 pick? Now, at a different spot in the draft, maybe we can talk about it. Although my spot in the draft is probably a hell of a lot lower with Will Levis than yours. CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, 53% completion percentage. The Anthony Richardson thing is funny because, and I think Lance Zierlein said this, talking about Anthony Richardson. The highlights are amazing. It's the stuff between the highlights that is the problem. Look, if you just judged highlights, then if you were picking a point guard back in the day, you might pick Jason White Chocolate Williams over John Stockton just based on highlights. But a highlight tape's 5 minutes. Game's an hour. So as great as those highlights look, let's look at everything else. And we also look at potential as this math problem. And this is the new analogy I've thrown out, where someone can go solve that math problem, no matter how hard it is. You can go Goodwill Hunting, Matt Damon solving the math problem, and you just untap this potential. There's no guarantees that happens. You've seen quarterbacks with not a lot around them win in the SEC. You saw it with Dak Prescott. Now, was Dan Mullen a little bit of a mess? Yes. Did he seem to have something against Anthony Richardson? Maybe. I know he brought up that he hurt his knee dancing or something like that. But it's a hell of an assumption to say that because of a highlight tape that Anthony Richardson is all of a sudden worthy of being the number 2 pick. When you have 8-10 years of body of work with Bryce Young playing at the highest level, go back to middle school. You got a scholarship offer in middle school. So if you don't like Bryce Young, then cool. Chances are you can bet against every quarterback taken in the top 5. And again, more times than not, you're going to punch that ticket. You're going to cash out whatever you want to cash out. And you're going to look smart doing it. But I just can't be sold on these other guys. I can't. Was I saying the same thing about Josh Allen? Yes. Quarterbacks made idiots of all of us. But I'm willing to bet on Bryce Young being the best one of this bunch. I think he's just set up to be better. I saw the light kind of, the 33rd team put out a graphic, and I just thought it was kind of funny because of the reaction, but I also think it was pretty accurate as to what I think of 2 of the other quarterbacks along with Bryce Young. 33rd team, it's kind of like an up-and-coming football site. I think they just hired Joey from Barstool, so that should be funny. The dude who does all the impressions, Coach O, Nick Saban, all that. So that should be cool. But they put up these comparisons, and the internet immediately went nuts. And when you compare someone, you're comparing them to their ceiling. You're not comparing them to their floor. And I found this really interesting. So you look there, you see Bryce Young, Drew Brees. I think that's a perfect comparison. I think Bryce Young is a more athletic Drew Brees. I think everything that you need upstairs, Bryce Young has. He's also a little bit smaller, probably a little bit, definitely a little bit, more fragile of a frame than Brees. But I think those guys play alike. Will Levis, you have Ryan Tannehill there. I think that's perfect. CJ Stroud, Andy Dalton. A lot of people rolled their eyes at that, but Andy Dalton was a solid starter, led a team to a playoffs a couple times. At TCU, he won a Rose Bowl, which I think CJ Stroud did as well. So they both won a Rose Bowl. They both won a lot of games in college. Both can make plays with their legs, probably don't do it very often. You saw CJ do it against Georgia and in the monsoon against Northwestern. But I just thought these comparisons were perfect. And the question is, would you take Ryan Tannehill? Obviously not the Miami version. Would you take Ryan Tannehill number 2 overall? I think most of you would say no. Would you take Andy Dalton number 2 overall? I think most of you would say no. Now, these comps could be completely off, and those guys could end up making a lot of people look dumb. I think they're pretty good comps. I look at them as pretty damn good comps, which is why I'm starting to become more open to the possibility of the Texans not taking a quarterback number 2, which according to 670 The Score, that is a possibility. They said file that away. Texans don't take a quarterback. The question then, if the Texans don't take a quarterback, and let's say that they think that Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, or hell, they decide to trade down themselves. Let's say the Texans decide they're going to go a different route. What do they do at quarterback then? If it's not going to be any of these rookie guys, what do they do at quarterback? Do they go the Jimmy G route? I've already talked about this in a previous video. Jeremy Fowler threw out the name Jimmy Garoppolo. Spot Rack has Jimmy Garoppolo's contract value right now at $35 million. I just don't see how in the hell anyone's going to give Jimmy Garoppolo $35 million. I get it with Derek Carr. Jimmy Garoppolo, I just don't know. There wasn't much of a market for him last year. Now, he had the shoulder issue. What is the market going to be for Jimmy Garoppolo? These teams that need a quarterback. Are the Jets going to consider Jimmy Garoppolo? Raiders? Could there be like a Josh McDaniels reunion? I think the best thing that could happen to Jimmy Garoppolo is Aaron Rodgers goes on the McAfee show tomorrow and retires. And then that's where maybe the market opens up for Jimmy Garoppolo, but I could easily see a situation where Jimmy Garoppolo thinks he's worth this. The rest of the league thinks he's worth this. We get to training camp, and by the time we get to training camp, most teams in the league have their quarterback situations figured out, and maybe Jimmy Garoppolo is one of those $10 million backup quarterbacks. I could absolutely see that scenario playing out. Kind of what happened last year with San Francisco. Now, San Francisco, he had the hurt shoulder, and San Francisco had to make tough decisions, and it just kind of fell their way with the Lance injury. But what is the market for Jimmy Garoppolo? Find it really interesting. Tonight, we're going to do a live at 9 o'clock. We're going to talk more about first-round quarterbacks. I have all the quarterbacks of the last 10 years laid out, and we're going to go through them, talk more about this situation. I know a lot of people probably mad that I said what I said about Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, whoever. Everybody has an opinion. That's the beauty of this. Embrace debate, cuss, discuss, do what you got to do. But for me, it's Bryce or something else. Now, if they think they can make it work with one of these other guys, fine. But again, the odds are against you. So no matter what I say about Bryce Young, no matter what you say about the other guys, what do we find? 3 out of 14 were franchise quarterbacks that were drafted in the top 5. This will be interesting. It's a hell of a time to be alive. Nick Caserio speaks tomorrow at 10:45. We'll have that for you live on Sports Radio 610 live on the Odyssey app. So download the Odyssey app. We got you. D'Amico Ryan's going to speak at noon on Wednesday. Yeah, he's going to speak at noon on Wednesday. So we got you covered there as well. Embrace debate. Quarterback, Bryce Young or bust for me. What say you? Comment, subscribe, keep riding along. Join me for the live stream tonight at 9 o'clock. Interactive, #1 source for Texans daily digital content. Spread the love. Enjoy it. No matter what happens, whether it's Bryce, whether it's CJ, whether it's none of the above, we're all in this together. Happy Monday.